Today is Wednesday, August 6th, 2025. I am the interviewer, Amy Moritz, with Mike Rappl at the Julia Boyer Reinstein Library. A 7-time Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference Coach of the Year, Mike was tasked with starting the softball program at Canisius College, which is now Canisius University, back in 1980, a program he steered for the next 35 years. Mike also served as both assistant and head women's basketball coach, athletic facilities coordinator, compliance officer at Canisius, and a bunch of other things. Lots on the resume. He's a member of the St. Mary's High School Athletic Hall of Fame, Western New York Softball Hall of Fame, the Canisius Sports Hall of Fame, and the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame.
Wow, who's that?
You're like, wait, when did all of that happen, right?
I don't know. You get so busy, you just keep doing stuff.
Right, yeah, and the more you do things, the more people ask you to do.
Exactly.
That is true. Well, I'm going to start because I ask everybody this. Like, do you remember what's a time that you first remember really falling in love with sports?
I guess grade school. And I can remember one instant in gym class, dodgeball, where I don't know what happened. I was playing all the time. We used to play neighborhood. It wasn't organized, but we would play street against street, and it was good for us because you had to make the calls, you had to solve arguments, disputes, etc. But then I remember just playing, growing up, everything, and then one day in gym class, I must have been 6th grade, I looked around, and I was the only one left in a dodgeball. And I was like, what happened here? And I think that was the start. Then we had a priest come in, and he started baseball and basketball teams, and he kind of was our mentor and led us. And I just loved it. Matter of fact, I played a lot of sports in high school, and I can remember in the afternoon just watching the clock tick. I couldn't wait to get out to practice. So I just, everybody thinks you're going to play professionally, you're going to do this and that. But it was sport. It was fun. I loved it. Couldn't wait to get on the field, the diamond, whatever it was.
Now, but before we started recording, you were telling me a little, your origin story at Canisius goes back before you were even a student at Canisius, right?
That's an interesting story. I wanted to play at Canisius, and I went there to start my career. But my mother was the equipment manager in the gym, so I was always up in the gym playing against the basketball team, one-on-one, pickup games, whatever. I was always there. But I also remember when it was time for the women's basketball practice, they would close the dividing door and they would have 1/3 of the gym. And I thought, that doesn't seem right. And then I saw more of that as I went to school there and I hung out and all those kind of things. But men's basketball got everything. And again, if you look at Little 3 history and the games in the odd, when we were in high school, we would die to get a ticket to go down. And we'd take the bus down. I mean, it was more independent and more innocent when I grew up. You take off and then you come home. Nobody knew where you were, what you were doing, but we always were down there watching the games and seeing Canisius and Niagara and Bonna and the other teams they brought in. And people will say, why can't we have that anymore? But if you go back and you really look at history, men's and women's sports, the mode of travel was train. The trains from the West Coast to the East Coast came through Buffalo. They would stop and play. That's why you had those big-name schools here. And that was the heyday of basketball in the odd and packed arena and doubleheaders. And you can't do that again. Canisius was a little school. Niagara, Bonna had more success because they had some profile players, but they all did in the Little 3 era. And then we were part of that as kids watching all that.
Uh-huh. What was it? So before I ask about, that's a great, I want to follow up on why we can't do that again. But what was that impact? Look, I grew up hearing stories about doubleheaders at the odd too, and I was at the tail end of some of that. But how important was that for the local college community, for basketball community? What was that experience like?
That's what you did on a Saturday night. People got dressed up. The women are wearing dresses, guys are wearing ties and suits. Now, we were high school kids. We didn't do that, but we would still go down there, and we all thought we're going to play there sometime. So let's fast forward to the point where now I'm coaching women's basketball, and we get to play in the odd. Now, that's, it's better than playing then. It was coaching there. So it came full circle. But that was the thing to do. There wasn't pro teams in Buffalo back then like there is now. There wasn't TV. There wasn't cable. So you did something. Whether it's go out to dinner and then go to the game, or go to the game and go to the dinner, or whatever. But that was the thing to do.
Yeah, that was, you mentioned like the pro sports weren't like they are now, and I think that's changed the culture for college sports.
Well,
in the
definitely,
area.
there are more. I mean, when I grew up, there was the baseball game of the week, one game a week on TV. I mean, now you could watch every game, the whole season. I watch the Yankees all the time. I'm a Yankees fan from way back when, but things have changed. Culture has changed. Is it good? Is it bad? Who knows? It is what it is. We have to live in the present of what we have.
So at Canisius, as a student, was coaching something you had thought about?
Very odd. I had a very odd track. It goes way back to part of Canisius. I had my own business coming out of high school with an English teacher. We had M&M Construction. There were no jobs when we were kids as teenagers, so we formed our own cutting lawns, and we ended up, by the end, we had a big business. We had dump truck, ladder truck. We were remodeling houses. Matter of fact, after my senior year in high school, I spent the whole summer in Rochester remodeling houses. This guy bought all these houses, and we fixed them up, and then he rented them. So I had my own business. So now I'm in business. I don't know what I'm going to do. I wanted to play basketball at Canisius. I couldn't try out for the team. Even though I played against all the guys in the gym all the time, I went in the coach's office and he said, I have enough players. I don't need any more. I was heartbroken. I couldn't even try out. And I know I could compete with them because I played against them. So, long story short, I ended up leaving Canisius. And for 2 years, I just did all kinds of odd jobs. Well, while that was going on, my brother came home one day and said, can you do me a favor? I said, what do you need? He says, I'm late for baseball practice. Can you take me to practice? So this was at the local elementary school, Catholic school. So I took him there, and I stayed and I watched practice. I love sports, so I stayed there. So the next day, he says, can you take me again? So I go. Well, the guy that was coaching was a Cheektowaga police officer. And long story short is he says, you used to pitch. Why don't you throw batting practice for me? Boom. Then I get done with batting practice. I'm getting ready to go. He says, no, why don't you help me coach? Well, I coached with him for a couple weeks. And what happened was he got his hours switched. He was also the gym teacher at the Catholic school. So he couldn't do it anymore. So this is the craziest story. So we walk in to the principal's office, and he introduces me. My brother's name was John. He said, this is John's brother, Mike. He's going to coach the team now because I have to change my hours, and he's going to teach the gym classes for me. He didn't ask me. He just told me. So the nun was okay with it. As a matter of fact, they said, okay, we'll pay you $2.50 a class. I mean, go back in history, this kind of stuff. So anyway, I started teaching the gym classes, but I had boys and girls. It was co-ed up to 5th grade, and then they had another girl that would teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade girls, and I would have the boys. So I got to know all the kids. Well, now I'm coaching. All right, let's go with 1974. There was no girls softball team. I'm kind of like the coach, and I'm now the AD, so we take them to the city track meet. We have boys baseball. We have boys basketball. And this girl comes to me and says, can I try out for the team this year? I said, the baseball team? I said, sure. Her brother was on the team. 1974, I have a second baseman who's a girl playing for me. This is a crazy story. We go to a game, and we're meeting with the umpire before the game, and the other coach looks at me and looks at the ump and says, we're not playing. And I said, why not? He says, is that a girl over there? I said, yeah, we don't play girls. I said, well, we have a game scheduled, so if your boys don't want to play, which I think they'd be upset if you don't play, but we're going to take the forfeit. And he goes, So we played. So I had a girl playing, 74. Unheard of. There was no softball team so it started me thinking, are there enough girls who want to play? And, you'd play in gym class and stuff. And anyway, so let's fast forward a little bit more. Later on in the early 80s, I was teaching and coaching when I started coaching at Canisius. But I always bring the kids up to the games at Canisius. We'd play at the halftime of the games. We played in the audit halftime and all those kind of things. You just do it. So they always saw me up there with kids and in the batting cage and basketball and everything else. So I'm in the office. My office for intramurals was the same as the women's athletic director's office, and she was also a teacher in the phys ed department. She goes, we have to start some more sports for women, and we're going to have a varsity softball team next year, and we would like you to coach it. So anyway, I did. But that was kind of the start of it. But you probably heard from some of the other girls. At one time, sister was coaching at Sacred Heart and Canisius. I was coaching at Blessed Sacrament and Canisius for a number of years. So I had all those. I'll give you one more story about that grade school. It was the early 80s. Now I'm just getting into softball at Canisius, but I'm doing both. I'm running around like a chicken without my head. So we have a fall season, and I had a girl try out. Her two brothers had played for me, and she played third base, and she was pretty good. And the fall, I don't know if you know at a grade school, there's parochial school. They have a big fall tournament, all the schools. And then there's a spring league where you're usually in your local area. And then you get another tournament in the spring. So in the fall, little school, Blessed Sacrament and Depew, we make it all the way to the state, to the parochial finals of the city. And we ended up losing, and she played third base for us. Now I'm the AD. There's enough girls' interest now. We start a softball team. Matter of fact, my brother and his friend coached it, John, who was the original baseball player. So this girl couldn't play for us in the spring, and we had gone to the championship again in the spring, and the difference was if she was there, we made a couple errors at her spot that I don't think she would have made. I think we would have won the parochial championship. But anyway, I had that history of And some people were good about it, and other people, like that first coach, he just, people didn't understand. And my look at it, and people would say, well, why are you coaching women's sports? And there was some people in the area that thought I shouldn't be coaching women's sports. I didn't care. Sport was sport. And to be honest, somebody asked me one time, what was the difference? I remember the first practice I had with the softball team. There were girls who played volleyball. There were girls in the dorms who just showed up. There was no recruiting back then. It was whoever was there. And I had the first practice. And if you're a teacher, you get this. When the kids are all looking out the window or at the clock or anything, first practice, they're all staring at me like, what are you going to tell us? And they were like sponges. It was like, holy cow, they really want to be here. And they learned. They hadn't had the coaching like nowadays. They didn't have the travel leagues and the AAUs and all that kind of stuff that they have nowadays. So, and basically I had to learn a little bit. So I went to Larry O'Connor, who had the Shamrocks, and then he had me coach with him the Empire game. So in our area back then, recruiting-wise, you saw local, but there weren't a lot of teams. And so I hung out with Larry, and then I ended up coaching with him. I had to learn pitching, because that was the difference. Everything else was pretty much the same except leadoffs and slapping. So I put the work in, and we got better and better and better. And then, we tried to get the local kids who played. There was only a couple high schools that had teams in the early 80s. There was no AAU, nothing, basketball or softball. And so you had to find people. So you did the best you can. And then as it grew, the sport grew in the high schools. And Empire was the biggest recruiting area for both basketball and softball back then with the scholastic teams, because you could go and see everybody throughout the state. And most of the colleges, they didn't have wide range of recruiting. It was like you played whoever was available. You coached with whoever was available. As a matter of fact, another crazy story. The first year I had the team, I said, do we have uniforms? No, we didn't have any uniforms. Oh, you're going to wear the volleyball jerseys. But where are they? Well, the girls have them in the dorm. So I had to send the girls into the dorm to find the volleyball players to get it. And we didn't have enough jerseys. So anyways, it was economic. It was do what you can. So we started running clinics and camps to fundraise so we could travel and all those kind of things. But it was very, very different in the early years.
Yeah. I have many softball questions, but before I get to that, I want to ask you about basketball and coaching with Sister Maria, who is obviously a legend in the area. I've talked to several people who've played for her. What was your experience like coaching with her? What was that like?
Well, the first meeting I'll tell you about was interesting. So I had been coaching the softball team for 2 years, and it was we're hiring a nun. Like, I'd heard her name. I didn't know her at all. And they brought her in, and now I'm in the athletic director's office because that's my office now. I got a table in there, and I meet her. It was just a ball of fire, just a ball of fire. Well, the whole premise was she was still going to be coaching at Sacred Heart and teaching. She was teaching phys ed classes at Sacred Heart. But they wanted somebody to stay at Canisius to be there for the girls if they needed help, with so many things you need help with, academics, classes, scheduling, whatever. Back then, the coaches did all that. You didn't have anybody extra doing that. I had study halls for them and everything. But I'd be there. I'd get the practice set up. I'd make sure we had the gym set up and all those things, and then she'd come in. And some days she'd come running in, throw her coat on the chair, and right in the gym we'd run. But she was a ball of fire. But I did learn a lot from her, how you could be tough and you could expect things from the girls, and you could treat them fairly, but you could be tough. It wasn't personal. It was like, come on, we want the best out of you. And I'm going to give you a funny story because I thought of this as I was driving in. So Sister and I were coaching, and I would prepare scouting reports, whatever we could back then. There wasn't games online or anything, so whatever you could find out, you found out. So this is before MJ Telford at Bonna. We're playing Bonna to open the season, and we're getting everything ready, and they hired a guy. I didn't know where he came from or whatever, but he was an older gentleman. And I had heard because the girls played against each other and stuff, that he didn't think the girls should exert themselves too much. So they only practiced half court. So I told Sister this, well, we're going to run them. And we did. And it was like, it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair at all. They were huffing and puffing halfway through the first start of the first half, and we're just like, we're playing because we ran all the time. But it was a lot of fun and a learning experience. But it was great. It was really great. And some of the girls probably told you that year where we went to 2 national tournaments back to back. We actually outdrew the men in the Kessler Center. They weren't very good back then. I mean, the change from the 50s and 60s to back then. Mm-hmm. But and the school got on board. We would win, and we would win, and we would win. And we were fun to watch, and they wanted to come and see a nun coach, too, so that was pretty cool. But they would borrow pots and pans from the cafeteria, and they'd parade over, banging the pots and pans into the game. I mean, we had such a home court advantage, and we did so well that, we hosted the states and the regional for 2 years. It was awesome.
That's, yeah. Does it kind of show you, there were, I don't know what resources afterwards for that. And I know there was a lot of 1-2 and going up and down that also impacted things, but that when you're winning and when you have a fun product, but fun, people show up. Right?
Well, nowadays sport is all, let's put a show on, it's entertainment. We had entertainment because we were good, but we had Sister there. Matter of fact, some of the things she would come out with, some of the sayings, she just got mad at a referee. I never heard her swear, but she called him Buster. And she got attacked for calling a ref Buster. People who were there will start laughing if they hear this. It was amazing to see. She would stamp her feet, and my whole one side, wherever she was on that side, was all black and blue. Because they would always get, But, we were entertainment, and it was fun. And back then it was, they knew everybody wasn't on scholarship. We had some scholarships, but it wasn't you're getting everything. And so there wasn't that. We were regular students. Kids hang out with them. And then the other thing we started doing was Sister and I, we actually recruited, back when nobody did it, boys to play against us because they were faster, stronger, which would help us get better. But with a caveat, you had to pick the right guys. So I had, over the course of time, I don't know we didn't give them a title, but they were like student leaders who would say, hey, bring 6 guys in this week, Tuesday and Thursday. But they gotta be okay getting scored on, and they can't be mad at the girls if they, beat them and whatever. And we did. We had some great guys. Matter of fact, the local guy who was one of my recruiters for players and headed it up was Steve Boyd, which is real interesting. He brought the kids, and that helped us so much. But we did that before. Nobody thought of that back then, So you survived on what you could within the rules, and we did. Mm-hmm. But sister and I, to answer that question, we became good friends, and I was supposed to see her, a sad part of it, shortly before she passed. And it just didn't work. She wasn't in good enough shape, but she had a cottage up in Canada. I used to go up there in the summer and hang out and talk about stuff and recruiting. Got another great Sister Maria story. I had to do it umpire games. We'll tie this all together. So Syracuse always hosted the games. And end of July, early August, stinking hot. And so the only way we knew was watch all the games. You got to see everybody. And so we were coaching after this. Now we're recruiting there. We're watching all the games because we're going to see everybody in the state. Who are we going to recruit? So the food at there was so-so. Dorm food, cafeteria food. So we go to this steak and seafood place. And it was, I don't eat seafood, but it was all the crab legs you could eat. So sister got them. And the waiter comes and says, would you like another plate? Oh, I don't know if I can eat. All right, okay. So she takes them, right? She puts it in the styrofoam container. We go back to the hotel. We're getting up in the morning, but we don't have to go to a game till 10 o'clock because we've seen the 8 o'clock people. So we're going to sleep in because we've been there all week. And we go out to open the car. Phew. The crab legs were left under her seat. I couldn't get that stench out of that car for months. I had to finally sell that car. But it's a great, great story. But it's how everything we did was stuff like that. And it was so much fun and good memories of it. But she brought out the best in the players. She wanted the best of them. Our recruiting range was not very far. In the beginning years, it was all through the state, Empire games, local. There was very good basketball in the local girls' leagues, parochial league, Catholic leagues, and stuff like that. And, we started here, get the best out of here, and then eventually we extended out. When we started coaching, we didn't have a recruiting budget. We didn't have budgets for scouting or any of that stuff. One day, I remember this, we're playing Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. We had an early afternoon practice, like 1:32. I don't know why. Usually we were after the men. Somehow we were before them. So we get done with practice, and I get in the car, and I drive to Slippery Rock, take all my notes. Well, I got there a little early. I was tired. I slept 20 minutes in the car, went into the game, watched the game, get out of the game, drive back, get all the notes ready, fix them up. And then the next day we had them in practice because the next day we were playing Slippery Rock. Crazy stuff like that we did, but you didn't think about it. You just did it, But in the early years, you had to do what you thought was best for the kids. And if anybody ever asked, I think to both of us, what we did was we saw the talent in the kids. We tried to put them in the right spot, and we did the best we could to make them be as successful as they could be. Mm-hmm. And I guess history shows it was pretty good. But that team we had the first couple of years as a Division II team, we could have played with anybody. Matter of fact, every year we were in the Syracuse Manufacturers Hanover tournament. Those were all Division I teams. And, we did well all the time.
During those years, were there any, and you don't have to get specific, but were you and sister, were you fighting for resources? Like, was there anything with like that was maybe the players that I talked to, they're like, we don't know what was going on. We got what we got, and that was great, and we knew that we were taken care of. But were there things about anything behind the scenes?
Well, we fought to get some things, and sister would go to Father Dembski, who was the president, And I don't know if the N-Star ever thought she was going over his head, but we didn't have a lot, so anything we got, the kids appreciated, and I think that's where that's coming from. And I remember this to this day. We finally got sneakers, so we had one pair. And they were delivered, and we had them all try them on and run through warm-ups. And then we didn't want them to get blisters, so we said, now take them off and put them in the box and put your practice shoes on, And one pair. Are you kidding me? And then the guys are, they're walking out with, boxes of them under their arms. So we knew that wasn't fair. But again, it was we didn't want to go and demand, because where are you going to get with that? We wanted to slowly try to go in. I've been there at Canisius, was there so long. So later on, when I was coaching and it was Division I, I remember walking into the athletic director's office and saying, and I was the compliance director, so I had all the budgets, scholarships, travel, recruiting. Well, let's go back a minute. Sister and I did go in and ask for recruiting money, and we got some towards the end. Not a lot, but at least now we don't pay it out of our own pocket, which we were doing. Was that fair? No, but what are we going to do? Put a sign out front? So we did get some, but when we had to go Division I walked in and I said, now we're going to play the same schedule because we're in the same league now, and why is the men's travel budget 4 times what the women's is? And I didn't say it nasty, and Sister did the same thing. We needed recruiting money and travel money. But you had to, when you had nothing, one of the problems with all these small schools were they didn't have the money to open it up when Title IX came in and said you had to do this. Basically, you had to have an opportunity or the money component. One of the problems with a lot of schools was because they had football with the 100 of guys. But what do you have of sport and women that have that money? And that's why they added a lot of sports. But anyway, men's team, and I know specifically, we finally got to where we could have vans instead of driving our own cars. And so we're driving a van to Siena. The men's team is flying to Albany. Is that fair? I mean, and those were the little things that you go and you talk about. And little by little, we got there. But again, we knew the school didn't have the money. What are they going to do? They didn't have gold in the basement. Nothing was there. So everything we got was appreciative by the players and the coaches. Was it fair? Could it have gone quicker? It wasn't a lot of thinking. When we started a lot of women's sports, it was like, okay, we got a team for them. Well, what about, my first contract, softball, 1980, $400. So I'm getting ready for the season. I got hired in the fall. We had little kids out in the field and tried to do some things. We didn't even have a field back then. But that's another story. But so we're trying to get ready. And then I'm looking ahead and I'm saying, okay, go back to the AD. I need some bats. I need some game balls. We got to pay umpires. Oh, I didn't think of that. There was no budget. So my $400, where'd it go? We're buying bagels and sandwiches when we have a game where we're missing a meal. And, but basically, if you think about the early years, you played who you could play. There weren't leagues. So you play where you can go. Who's around? Buff State, Niagara, Bonna, UB, sometimes Damon, depending on what sport it was. So you played the local people, and it was just you played to play. So that was the opportunity, but that was the growth of it started there. And we were fortunate that we got successful pretty quick, and that led to more and more. And slowly and steadily, I would go in and ask for more and more, just like Sister did with and we got to the point where, one of the things that with instant success, we had instant success. It was unbelievable. We didn't even know how good it was when we did it. The first year we go to National AIAW tournament. The second year the NCAA comes in, and they're going to pay for the tournament. Well, the first year, I don't know if you heard this story from anybody, the first year we almost didn't go to the tournament because there was no money. And I think we had some people that were men's basketball boosters that supported the women a little bit. And somebody went to Father Cook and said, you can't make them raise their own money to go to this tournament. You're going to have to send them because it's going to be a black eye. And Father Dunsky, he agreed. And we got signed. Yes, we started selling pizzas. Yes, but nobody's buying pizzas because it was in the quad party, so everything was free. Who's going to buy a pizza from the girl? So anyway, we made that. And I remember sister, we'll sell pizzas. Might as well sell pencils. But like the other sports in softball, we sold T-shirts in the dorms and stuff. We needed to raise money to supplement budget. So in the early years, we're tough, but it was growth. And the girls were appreciative of everything they got because they never had any of that. Later on, these kids who did this AAU stuff, they're traveling better than what we did. They're seeing things. They're going to national tournaments because they could pay into them. And it's a lot better than, what they're going to get at the college. So why do they want to do it anymore? So the change was rapid.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a bit because I want to talk about the softball culture in Western New York, especially 70s, 80s, maybe even into the 90s. You had mentioned, the Shamrocks. There were a lot of really good softball players in the area around then. Can you just talk about what that culture was like?
Again, it goes back to the coaches of those teams. They had the foresight to start those teams and to be very competitive with who they played. And so if you were a young girl at that time, there weren't a lot of opportunities for you to go anywhere. As a matter of fact, when I first started going, basically I was trying to recruit to Canisius, girls that were playing on the Shamrocks who were at Canisius. They wouldn't play softball for me. And they were very good. And so I started going there, but to learn the game, but also to try to get to recruit them to come. But there was the Shamrocks, there were the Sunbirds who became the Breskies, and there was a lower level team which might have been, I don't know if it was 16 and under, 18 under, in North Tonawanda called the Jacks. Those were the only three teams in the area. If there was high schools, it wasn't organized. Not everybody had a team. There were very few high school teams in the 70s. Very few. So as a need, what does a girl do then? Okay, so Kim Call. I don't know if you get a hold of her. She's the greatest golfer in this area. I mean, she's still a great golfer. But she played basketball, volleyball, and wouldn't play softball at Canisius, but she played on the Shamrocks, and she was, I don't know what they called it back then, All-American or whatever, in the national tournaments. It was really, really good. But what did she do? 15 years old, she's playing with, 30-year-olds, 35-year-olds, and some of those girls, Marianne Hopkins, Pam Amabile, Diane Court, they were unbelievable players. But where else are they going to play? So one thing, by going to play with the older players, they got better right away, and their talents could come out. And that was the only opportunity they had. So seeing that and how rapidly that changed, and all of a sudden now there's other teams. But if you want to talk about, I don't know what you call them, travel ball now or whatever, or Amherst was one of the first organizations to start girls softball, but they had one team at 14 and under, one team at 16 or 18, one team. Now you get 4 teams in each age group. But that's wonderful for the girls now, but that opportunity was not there in the early years. So what could they do? They maybe had a gym teacher that knew Larry O'Connor or Cindy Bresky or whatever, and they could recommend them. But then they had to go and try out, too, with the older girls. And that had to be daunting for them. Think about that. You're 15 years old. You're going out there with women who've been playing internationally against Olympic-caliber people, and you're holding your own. That's got to boost your confidence. But, sink or swim, right? So, but that was the history of it. There wasn't the opportunities. Now, you talk to anybody who's playing in high school, they got running coaches, they got pitching coaches, they got hitting coaches, they got strength coaches. That's what it was like in California when I started recruiting. That's why I started going out west, because they were years ahead of us. Maybe because of the weather, but whatever reason. You get a California kid, they've been playing at a high level all through those growth levels, 12 and under, 14 under, 16 under, 18 under. They're ready to play in college. And they're seeing pitching year-round. In the early years here, nobody played in the fall. There were no indoor facilities like now. So you played during your season, and that's it. Now you take a rest. It's like starting over. There's not that great learning curve that you have if you're playing year-round. So for people here to catch up to that, it took a while. And I would think, if I wanted to guess, we were 20, 25 years behind the West Coast.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Oh, easily. And a matter of fact, just for historical significance, I remember trying to put a schedule together to go somewhere on a spring break. Nobody took spring breaks around here. You waited almost until the end of April to get outside to play. Now everybody's playing in February. So I called down to a couple Florida schools, Jacksonville and St. Augustine's in North Carolina, maybe. And we scheduled a spring break. We're driving vans. Matter of fact, we took a 10-day trip through North Carolina one time, which was unbelievable. But that was one of our early trips. But we're a couple months away, and I'm calling just to check. And the one coach says, "You do know we play slow pitch, right? In Florida, they had a collegiate slow pitch league in the early years. People don't know that. North Carolina, that was slow pitch. So I got to say, guys, I'm sorry, we can't come. We're playing fast pitch now, and there were slow pitch. But as soon as the NCAA started offering opportunities, all that changed. So that was a significant time when the NCAA took over. Like that year, we went from 80, I think it was 82 to 83, maybe. Excuse me. The NCAA took over. They were going to pay for stuff. All of a sudden, everybody got on board.
Right. Yeah. What did you notice as the difference between, so when you started, AIAW was the governing body for intercollegiate women's sports mostly. Then when it shifted and the NCAA took over, was there anything that stands out to you about that transition time?
Besides the ability to have your postseason paid for, that was it. And the AIAW was the organization, but it wasn't so organized, but it was an opportunity. And it was almost in the beginning like the NCAA was stepping on the toes of the women pioneer who did that. It wasn't vocalized, but as soon as the economics came into play, everybody jumped on board and saw the difference. There was no way to go back. But in the beginning, that was the opportunity that the women had. Not as organized, not as efficient, no funding, but it was an avenue. There were some AIAW championships in the early years, but avenue to get there wasn't as clear as like the NCAA. You got, you compete locally, you win your league, you get the tournament, and you advance, etc. Back then, AIAW, there was a state tournament, there was a regional tournament, and then there was nationals. Not as many participants as nowadays, obviously, because of, again, finances and all those kind of things. But the significance of that was we were never asked to sell pizzas again.
That is always right a good thing. You alluded to this a little bit. We're talking AIAW time and Title IX. You often hear it's stat driven, but you hear so Title IX created all these opportunities for girls and women to play, but now there's fewer women coaching women. And so, you talked about, sports is sports, but when people talk about that, what's your...
Well, I can go many different ways, but basically, it gave us. I coach women. I'm us. I never looked at as, and people said I shouldn't be coaching. I told you that, but to me, that was us. We developed it, but it gave us an opportunity, and people want to say it gave us a right. I mean, the avenue was now there, open up for the doors to open for the opportunities. It took a while to get there. The bigger schools with finances, they could jump in, but interestingly, also, if you look at the big schools back in the 60s and 70s, if they had women's sports, they were autonomous from the athletic department. Men's. It was a men's AD, it was a women's AD. A lot of the bigger schools had a men's gym, a women's gym, Now everybody has their own fields. I mean, we were fortunate enough with softball to go play at, Arizona and UCLA and then everybody in Michigan. Every sport's got their own facility. And then we're fighting at Canisius to share the gym. We're sharing the field. And the opportunities were there, and the bigger schools jumped on it, and it was more advantageous to the women to go there. Right now, if you want to equate it to back then, it's like the NILs. Little school, Canisius, Bonn, and Niagara, they're not going to survive in this environment. And I guess that's the thing. The bigger schools wanted to run out the little schools. And now it's going to get like that. That team we had, and a number of our softball teams, and those teams we had that went to nationals with basketball, would never happen again. In this day and age, if we had those same people here now, somebody would sneak in and take them. Or the kids would open up in the portal to see if they could get a better deal or get money. I mean, you're probably familiar with the Texas Tech pitcher, Nigel Kennedy. $1 million? Are you kidding me? I never had a budget anywhere near that if I could add it up for all the years I coached. But the opportunity, great. It's great for her, but it's also now, it's business. It's not like back then. Those girls we had, the families all traveled with us on the buses. Finally, when we get a bus to go to state or regional, the families could go on a bus with us. And they had dinners for us. Gina Costelli's mom. My favorite meal all the time, pasta, Italian meatballs, and salad and bread. And my goodness, we wouldn't have that nowadays. It's just not the same. And that was such a fun time for us. But they were all part of us, too. They were at every game, all of those family members. And it was great following. Nowadays, I guess, okay, good. If a girl can make that, I'm a first $1 million softball player, great. But what about everybody else? What about the Canisius kids now, the Niagara kids, the Bonnet kids? There was a kid at Canisius this year who was the Rookie of the Year in the MAC. It's gone. I just don't see that it's the same type of atmosphere we had. Is that good or bad? Well, for me, I liked it the way it was. It was sport. It was fun. You busted your butt. You did the best you can, and we got great memories for it. Nowadays, it's business.
Yeah. You were able to build a program, too, at a smaller school,
Well,
right?
everybody knows John Beeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
I played against John in high school, so I've known John forever. He was at the Sales when I was at St. Mary's playing. And he was successful every level he went. But his last year at Michigan, he came for one of his guys got inducted in the Canisius Hall of Fame. So I saw him, I don't know, it was late fall or whatever, whenever the induction was. He flew here from his practice, and he said, it's totally different. These guys are playing for their NBA money. John's whole premise was teach a guy to play the game so that everybody knows what spot they're in. Develop them over 4 years, and it'll be a cohesive unit. That you don't think twice. You know where they're going to be. You know who's going to cover for you if you get beat. You know where you're going to react to slide in defensively or whatever. He said, I can't coach these guys. They're playing for their NBA money. They don't want to listen. They don't want to play team ball. And I thought that is so sad, but that's what it's become to when it's a business. And again, we had that. He had it with the guys at Canisius. We had that at Canisius with Sister and I, and with the softball. It was wonderful. But progress. Sometimes progress isn't always for the better.
Yeah.
If you're Nigel Kennedy, yes, it's
good for good for her.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of bygone eras, you had mentioned the Empire State Games, and so many people who have played. If you played in it, and I remember going to it as a fan. How important? You had mentioned it for recruiting, obviously, but how important do you think the Empire State Games was for girls and women in general, and maybe even in all sports?
All sports. I used to go and watch gymnastics. I would go and watch boxing. I would go and watch row. I mean, I liked to see all the different sports. It didn't matter to me. But what was so important about it was now it was an organized activity. It was a setting similar to Olympics. Everybody wore the same sweatsuit marching into opening ceremonies. Those sweatshirts were to die for. Matter of fact, I don't know if anybody gave you stories, but we used to play at Syracuse, back on the hill, in the bad section back there. There were kids that were getting their sweatsuits stolen from them, walking to the dorm. So we had to go in numbers. I mean, everybody wanted those sweatshirts. But it was an opportunity that women didn't have. There wasn't AAU. There wasn't all these travel teams for softball. This was it. It was a greatly funded organization by the state. 6,000 athletes in one spot at one time competing. What a thing for a young and upcoming girl or boy to be in that situation. For them, it exposed them to all the coaches would come in and recruit in the Scholastic division. We did. Just that's where Sister and I started recruiting the Scholastic division. There were some great coaches out of Rochester. We weren't coaching yet in Empires. We're at Canisius. So we would go and see everybody in the state. I would do the same with softball. And so it was an opportunity for them, but also for the coaches, it was an opportunity to see the best in the state competing against each other. So you had high-level play in everything. And now to see them at their best, that could equate to how are they going to do in the college scene. And it's a shame that ended. But I would say probably for the first 10 years was like that. And then it started changing because now there were more opportunities. Now there were AAU teams. Now there were outside teams. There were travel teams. It kind of took away from it. And selfishly, none of the coaches wanted to give up any players to go play for Empires. Even if you said just it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Thursday you got there, you signed in, game started. Some games started Thursday night, but Friday, Saturday, Sunday. For a weekend, what would it hurt? No, I can't give up my best player. I'm not giving you my shortstop. I'm not, and that's what happened. It became this tug, Now there were more opportunities. Great. There were more coaches, but again, nobody, and that one person didn't control everything. It was everybody was going to control their own little piece. And too bad. It's too bad. I think there's still Empire winter games, but the summer games were fantastic.
Yeah, those were great. And I mentioned that I had talked with Kay Gould, who coached Empires like maybe one of the first years. And one of the things that was interesting too, I mean, you get this with some travel teams and if kids get to bigger levels, but you were able to, you're playing on a team with people from the city and from the farm and from all different types of areas where maybe in organized opportunities for girls at that time, you didn't have that exposure outside of your neighborhood.
That's very, very true. And think about a tryout. Okay, so the Western region goes all the way to Rochester. Down. And so tryouts were crazy. And now all of a sudden you may have heard of somebody. Now you're on the gym floor with them, or you're on the softball diamond with them. And you've heard of them, but now you see. Now you're out there. It was awesome, bringing everybody together. And also those kind of things give you a little confidence. Hey, I can play. I can play with these people. There was a girl that played Empire basketball for us out of Franklinville. And she scored over 2,000 points down there. And we had heard all this, and we figured, we knew she was tall. I don't know if she was 6'2" or 6'3" or something. And she's scoring all these points. They don't play anybody. Now she comes up and tries out, hey, the kid can play. Kid can shoot. And so you actually, as coaches, you saw those kind of things as well. Because back then, there weren't the opportunities to go and see those kids as much.
Right. Yeah, you didn't have social media clips to go and see what was going on.
And when they were playing, so were you.
Right.
So
yeah.
how do you go see them? But when you got this group that they all came together to try out, and remember the beginning. Actually, this is a funny story. We had a phys ed teacher at Canisius who was teaching a lesson in team handball when there was team handball tryouts. A bunch of us went and tried out. Just because this games are coming. It would be fun to play. We go and try out. That was just funny. That was before we started coaching at Canisius, but that was 78, 79, I think. But yeah, back then we saw all this stuff.
Yeah.
It was a whole new world that didn't exist before.
And yeah, I wish that I understand all the things that go with Empire State Games, but I will tell you, every woman that I've talked to that's played Empire State Games has talked about the sweatsuit. Like, that was to have the sweatsuit was huge, and they still have them.
Well, a lot of them do, and I unfortunately don't have any of mine. The coaches, if you won, you didn't get a medal. The kids got the medals. The coaches got the sweatsuit to hang on to. But you know what? If you're like me and you coached everything, you wear them out.
Yeah, right?
I wish I had some. They were really sweet. But yeah.
We talked a little bit about where college sports had kind of been going. I mean, you were 35 years coaching at Canisius, something like that,
yeah.
Right? 3 decades. It started incremental with things for women's sports. How did you see the university kind of grow in the way in which they not just offered, because I think they would, like you mentioned, they would forget, oh, here's the opportunity, then you forget the things that you need to make that successful.
Well, so let's go way back when we were going to offer sports for women. It was almost like it was looked at, something was going to be taken away from the guys. That's the way it was looked at. At some schools it was. Like some schools who brought women's teams in deleted men's teams because they had too many. Was that fair? No. But that was the beginning. There was resistance at a lot of schools. And like I alluded to, the schools that had separate athletic departments, they want to stay separate. But you can't do that. And in the early years, yeah, because it was always the good boys network. That's all there was. Now, I want to say this. Don't hit me. Don't kick me. In the early years, it wasn't okay for women to play sports. That was the thinking. Think about that. I got a girl in 74. I don't care. The kid can play. I see her in gym class. She wants to play. She's going to play. But it wasn't looked on the same way back then. Those kids were tomboys, or they're odd. Baloney. I thought that about men's hockey players. Hockey was odd when I was a kid. I mean, what you're brought up with. But as there were more opportunities, it became acceptable. And I think it forced the hand of a lot of schools and a lot of opportunities. Students are students. I don't care if you're male or female. You're an athlete, male or female. You're an athlete. You should have the same opportunities. We didn't for a long time at the small schools. And throughout the whole United States, you're going to hear the same thing. I don't care who you talk to. In the early years, it was not fair. It was not the same. Now, I could go on later and say about, the men's team is flying to Albany to play Siena, and we're driving vans. Was that fair? We're lucky we didn't have accidents, really. But it was because we had nothing to begin with. Anytime you got something, you appreciated it, and you didn't complain. But my whole take always was quiet behind the scenes, try to get something. And sister did the same thing the first couple of years. I think she went to Marquette. Marquette was a bigger school. She didn't have everything there. It was very difficult still. If you don't have the resources, it's tough to compete against people who do have the resources. And I always would say this, and it's even more so today. Let's take softball. And I had some very, very good years, and we had some great players. But could I, in good conscience, walk into my first meeting, look the kids in the eye, and say, guys, we got a chance to win the national championship this year? We could think it all we want. There's no way that was ever going to happen. There's no way financially, weather-wise, facility-wise, that we could ever think of doing that. Could we think about winning our league? Yeah. Could we think about getting to an NCAA tournament? Yeah, because we had the avenue to do that. But beyond that, was it fair? Was that fair to the players I had? I had some good players if we had facilities. I remember this to this day. One year, final rankings came out for softball, and we were 35th in the country. Okay, 280, 300 teams, whatever it was. 35th. I said, everybody is starting with Title IX to upgrade their facilities. I went to Canisius, and I said, we need to build a softball stadium. And they agreed with me. You can go ahead. So I paid an architect $2,000 to make a study. I still have the plans. And we started raising money for it. We just got to the next season, and the president came and said, we're changing hockey leagues. We may have to take the Kessler parking lot and build a hockey rink. So I can't let you expand into the parking lot to build a field. So the plan was to extend back so I could put bleachers up with underneath dugouts. Side dugouts underneath locker rooms, batting cage, and stuff like that. So could you put your plans on hold? And I remember going to the vice president because she was in charge of athletics. I said, it took a long time to build this program. It's not going to take a long time to go down. Shortly thereafter, everybody was building facilities. Hampton University built a stadium. They were terrible. They used to go like 3-43, and we played them on trips down through there. But all of a sudden, they get a pitcher, she's throwing lights out, and they win their league, and they go to the NCAA tournament. It doesn't take much to go down. It takes a lot to build up. So I allude back to those first 2 years we had basketball with sister and I. We didn't know how lucky we had it. We had Division I players playing Division II. We were good, and they could play, and they were a family, and they listened, and they busted their butts. And nowadays, you're not going to get that, which is a shame because I've gone through that nostalgia of it, but it is what it is. If I was a coach now, probably be on the transfer portal every morning looking who's in there. You have to survive. If you're a coach, you survive by what you got, you deal with, and you do the best you can.
Yeah. I really think I think it'd be really tough to be a college coach right now, especially if you are a pre-portal person, right?
But if you're in there, you'd survive because you have to.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, rules changed when we were there. Recruiting changed. Mm-hmm. Seasons changed. I mean, there was one time, I'll go back because volleyball always played in the fall, but volleyball could play in the spring. Our seasons were terrible here in the spring if you didn't have turf or a field house. So there was talk at one time of changing softball to the fall for a number of reasons. And I was on some committees because your fields are in shape that you use, whether they're school fields or off-site. Mm-hmm. Your kids are in shape from playing in the summer, and the weather's better. Made sense. It almost passed, and then the West Coast schools put a kibosh on it, and then it was like, no way. I thought it was going to go. It was going to happen. Didn't happen. But, what are you going to do?
That's what sport is, right?
You would survive. You would survive. You would change. You would adapt. So, okay. So there were days that, we were in the parking lot at Kessler hitting fly balls. Kids were diving in the snow piles. We made it fun. Dive. There's soft.
A soft landing on the snowbank, right?
You got to watch when it's all ice, though.
You do, yeah. All right. So, Mike, last question for you. And you kind of have talked about this, but just the point of question is, what does Title IX mean to you?
To me, it got us to where we are nowadays because of the opportunities it allowed people to push for. There was no magician saying, Title IX is here, we'll fix your school, we'll fix your school. No, the schools had to adapt. And selfishly, we were late because the resistance, but mostly the economics of it. So it gave opportunities for now Nyjah Kennedy to get $1 million. Oh, great for her. Fantastic. I just worry about it's sport, but it's business. It's business of sport now. And how does that reflect on a college or university? Is that part of, remember I said, mind, body, spirit? It's not the same anymore. And some of the schools, they're generating a lot of income. Cable, not so much from ticket sales. Ticket sales will get you part way, but mostly cable, the packages, the bigger conferences and all that. And I fear now Title IX gave an advantage, but I think it's going to take away from the smaller schools. So when does it get to the point where everybody's like Division III, what now is really true sport, and you play for the fun of it and the people who are there? I don't know. But it did give opportunities that we're seeing people benefit. And go a little bit, off on a little tangent here. It's okay now for guys to watch women's basketball. It's okay for guys now to watch the NCAA tournament. It's okay now for girls to play. They're not looked on as the oddball anymore. That's what Title IX did, but also some of the women as a result of Title IX who led that. Caitlin Clark. Everybody knew Caitlin Clark. Paige Beckers. It's opening up what we knew was there from empires to the whole audience of people. And that is wonderful. That now a young girl can watch that and say, I want to be that girl. I want to do that. I can do that. Not like, oh, I wish I could do that. And think about that. If you were that kid and, it was poo-pooed on by your folks. Hey, Dad, can you play catch? Nah, girls don't play catch. Come on. So those things, it's more acceptable, which is wonderful. Where's it going to go? I have no idea. But there's plenty of opportunities out there now. We'll see.
Mike, thank you so much.
I hope that gave you what you needed. I didn't know.
This has been great. No, this has been great.